There is a library in the mountains of North Carolina where a man tried to hide from his own life. Over 20,000 books line the walls from floor to ceiling. Leather spines pressed against leather, gold lettering catching afternoon light through stained glass. The smell is old paper and beeswax and something else. Something like desperation disguised as scholarship. His name was George Washington Vanderbilt II, born 1862 into one of America's wealthiest families. Loved but unnecessary. Given $5 million and no empire to run. His brothers got railroads. He got books. So he built the largest private residence in American history. 250 rooms, 178,926 square feet, 1,000 workers, 6 years of construction, $5 million in 1895 money, approximately $189 million today, and at the center of it all this library, Sanskrit grammar, French philosophy, agricultural science, every book a brick in a wall between himself and a question he could not answer. What do you build when you are born with everything except a reason to exist? Walk through these rooms now, and you will see tourists taking photographs. They marvel at hand-carved ceilings, Venetian paintings, tapestries acquired from European estates. They see beauty, excess, the romance of Gilded Age wealth. They do not see the psychological architecture, the shame displacement, the compensatory proving that never ends because it can never succeed. They do not see a thin man with a dark beard sitting alone at the table in the center of this room. Gas lamps burning, snow falling outside, 125,000 acres of wilderness surrounding him, and he is here, turning pages, building walls of words between himself and a world that never needed him. George Washington Vanderbilt II died March 6th, 1914. Not here. In a Washington, D.C. hotel room, still negotiating a government land sale that would destroy everything he built. Still trying to prove inherited wealth could become earned worth. His daughter fled to Europe and never came home. His widow sold the dream piece by piece. His grandsons turned his sanctuary into a tourist attraction. 1.4 million visitors walk through these rooms every year now, paying money to see how a man with infinite money chose to live. But they do not ask the question that should haunt every room in this house. If you inherit everything, can you ever earn anything? He spent 51 years trying to answer. The house is still standing, and the question lingers, driving him to seek a place where monuments might still hold meaning. This is not a story about America's largest mansion. This is a story about what happens when you try to build your way out of irrelevance, when every progressive gesture is an attempt to earn what was simply given, when the only proof of worth you can imagine is a monument no one asked you to build. The library holds the truth. Over 20,000 books, every one a brick in a wall, every wall a barrier between the man and the answer he could not face. Chapter 1. The child who wasn't needed. November 14th, 1862. Staten Island, New York. The Civil War is tearing the nation apart, and William Henry Vanderbilt's wife gives birth to their 8th child, a boy. They name him George Washington Vanderbilt. He will never be needed. Not in the way his elder brothers are needed, not in the way sons are supposed to matter in families that build empires. By the time George can walk, the roles are already assigned. Cornelius will inherit the railroads, William Kissam will manage the fortune, Frederick will oversee the businesses. George will inherit money. Just money, which is everything and nothing. His father adores him. William Henry Vanderbilt, one of the richest men in America, looks at his youngest son and sees something he recognizes. Sensitivity, intelligence, the kind of thoughtfulness that has no place in the railroad business. He gives George what he can: affection, education, freedom. What he cannot give him is purpose. 1885. George is 23 years old when his father dies. The will is read. The estate totals nearly $200 million. Cornelius II inherits the bulk. William Kissam receives significant holdings. The other children receive trusts and properties. George receives approximately $5 million outright. Another $5 million in trust, roughly $10 million total. an amount so vast most Americans cannot conceive of it. In 1885, a factory worker earns roughly $380 per year. George's inheritance equals 26,315 years of labor, or the lifetime earnings of more than 500 workers. He is one of the wealthiest young men in America. He has no idea what to do with himself. His brothers immediately assume their roles, managing investments, expanding rail lines, building the Vanderbilt Empire into the 20th century. They marry socialites, build estates in Newport, host the parties that define the Gilded Age. George does none of this. He lives in family residences well into adulthood, moves between his mother's homes, studies, reads, collects. His brothers are too busy building railroads to notice their youngest brother is building something else entirely. A fortress of intellect. A defense against the question no one is asking, but everyone knows what is George for. He learns languages the way other men learn to drink or gamble or chase women. Obsessively. As if fluency could constitute purpose. French, German, Italian, Spanish, Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Sanskrit. 8 languages by his 20s. Not for business, not for travel, for the act of knowing itself. As if accumulation of knowledge could compensate for lack of application. He studies art history, architecture, agriculture, philosophy, can discuss Plato in ancient Greek, can read Dante in medieval Italian, can analyze Sanskrit sutras that his tutors cannot verify because no one else in his social circle cares about Sanskrit. He is, by every measure, brilliant. He is also completely useless. His intelligence has no outlet. His education has no purpose. In an age when Vanderbilt men are expected to multiply millions into tens of millions, George is memorizing verb conjugations in dead languages. The library begins when he is 12 years old, a gift from his father. First editions, rare manuscripts, books acquired from European estates. By his 20s, the collection numbers in the thousands. He catalogues them, studies them, arranges them by subject, by language, by period. He lives among them. His mother worries. His brothers ignore him. New York society whispers. The youngest Vanderbilt boy. So intelligent, so well-read, so utterly without direction. They do not understand what they are seeing. George is not directionless. He is building, not outward into the world, but inward into himself, constructing an alternative universe where his values define success, where learning matters more than earning, where sensitivity is strength and thoughtfulness is power. It is a beautiful delusion. It is also a survival mechanism, because if he cannot be useful in his family's world, he will create a world where usefulness is defined differently. If he cannot build railroads, he will build something his brothers cannot touch, cannot understand, cannot diminish. He will build a monument to everything they are not. But first, he has to find the place where monuments can still mean something. 1888. George is 26 years old. He has lived in his family's homes for his entire adult life, has spent a decade acquiring books, studying languages, perfecting an education that leads nowhere. His brothers are building empires. George is building bookshelves. The psychological mechanism has a name-shame-based displacement through compulsive proving. It works like this. You are given everything: money, status, education, freedom, but you are not given the one thing that makes those gifts meaningful. You are not needed. Your existence adds nothing to the family enterprise. Your presence changes nothing. So you displace the shame of uselessness into an alternative realm. You tell yourself you have chosen differently, that you value learning over earning, cultivation over accumulation, that your brothers are Philistines and you are a philosopher. But underneath the rationalization is the wound. You are loved but unnecessary, wealthy but worthless, free but paralyzed. Every book you acquire is proof you are not wasting your life. Every language you master is evidence you are not the useless youngest son everyone knows you are. Every hour spent in libraries is time not spent confronting the central fact of your existence. You were born into an empire that does not need you. The compensation must therefore be monumental. It is not enough to read books. You must own over 20,000 of them. It is not enough to study agriculture. You must apply scientific principles on a scale no American has attempted. It is not enough to appreciate architecture. You must build the largest private residence in the Western Hemisphere, because if you cannot inherit purpose, you will construct it. If you cannot be necessary, you will become undeniable. The wound is this: your father loved you and left you nothing to do. The mechanism is this: build monuments until someone notices. Prove worth until it becomes true. Demonstrate value so loudly that need becomes irrelevant. The trap is this: it will never work, because monuments built to prove something can never prove it. The act of building is itself the evidence of the wound. Every brick says I am trying. Every room says notice me. Every acre says I matter. And the more you build, the more you prove exactly what you are trying to disprove. You are compensating. George Washington Vanderbilt II does not know this yet. He only knows he must build something. Something magnificent. Something his brothers cannot diminish. He's about to find the place. But finding the place means displacing others, and that cost will echo for generations. 2. The Mountain Escape, 1888. George Washington Vanderbilt II steps off a train in Asheville, North Carolina, and sees his future. Not a city, not even really a town yet, just mountains, wave after wave of them rolling into blue distance, the smell of pine and wood smoke. Air so clean it hurts to breathe after New York's cold, thick atmosphere. He has come with his mother, a health trip. Asheville's climate is famous for healing consumptives, asthmatics, anyone wealthy enough to escape northern winters. The Battery Park Hotel caters to exactly this class. Magnificent views, mountain air, distance from everything that matters. George is 26 years old. His brothers are building mansions in Newport. Rhode Island, the fashionable choice, the correct choice, where Astor's and Morgan's summer, where society gathers, where power displays itself to power. George looks at the mountains and makes a different choice. He will build here, in North Carolina, in a place so remote that most of his social class cannot find it on a map, far from Newport's proving grounds, far from New York's judgment, far from his brothers' empires. The question should be obvious: why build here, where the people who matter will never see it? The answer is exactly that. He needs society to witness his rejection of it, needs to build something so magnificent that its very location becomes a statement. Look what I built where you will never come. Look what I valued over your approval. It is rejection as architecture, distance as defense, geography as psychological strategy. But there is another reason he chooses these mountains. They are empty, or appear to be, which means he can fill them with his vision, can acquire enough land that the estate becomes its own world, can create a place where his values govern, where learning matters more than profit, where conservation trumps exploitation, where he can finally be necessary because he built the necessity himself. The mountains offer what New York never could: a blank canvas. Room to build monuments. Permission to start over. He does not yet know what it will cost to make mountains blank. The land acquisition begins immediately. George hires local agents, gives them instructions. Buy everything. Assemble an estate worthy of his vision. Make me a kingdom in the mountains. It takes 1,200 separate transactions, 4 counties, 6 years of negotiation, 125,000 acres when it is finished. The scope is almost incomprehensible. 125,000 acres equals 195 square miles, larger than the city of Philadelphia, nearly 3 times the size of Washington, D.C., an area so vast you could walk for days and never leave Vanderbilt property. George pays market rate, sometimes more than market rate. His agents approach farmers, landowners, families who have worked these mountains for generations. They make offers, good offers, fair offers by any economic measure. But fairness and choice are not the same thing. When the richest family in America wants your land, you can refuse, technically, legally. But the refusal comes with knowledge that the offer will go to your neighbor instead, that the estate will surround you, that remaining becomes a kind of exile within someone else's kingdom. most people sell. Among them, the Shiloh community. 28 African-American landowners, 100-plus residents, roughly 200 acres of land their families have held since Reconstruction, land they bought with freedom, land they worked into farms, land where they built a church, established families, created the only thing Black Americans in the South could create in 1890, a community that belonged to them. George's agents approached them in 1891. The offer is generous. Reportedly, $37 per acre when surrounding land sells for $7. By some accounts, 5 times market value or more. More money than most Shiloh residents have seen at once in their lives. But it is still an offer to leave, to abandon land your family died to purchase, to relocate the church where you buried your parents, to move the cemetery where your children sleep. The Shiloh residents negotiate. They accept the offer. They have no real alternative. George pays to relocate them, buys land roughly 1 mile away, pays to move the church building, transfers ownership of the new church land to the Shiloh community itself, ensuring they own it outright, pays moving costs, offers employment on the estate during construction, by Gilded Age standards, by any standards of the time. This is extraordinary generosity. It is also displacement. The new community becomes New Shiloh. The old land becomes part of the Biltmore estate. The families who sold continue to live nearby, many working for Vanderbilt. But the land itself is gone, absorbed into a vision they did not choose. This is the cost nobody calculates. You can pay above market rate and still take something irreplaceable. You can be generous and still be powerful. You can give people choice and still shape every option they have. George is building a sanctuary from power. But sanctuaries require land. And land. In 1891, North Carolina belongs to someone. The Shiloh community was not the only displacement. Across 125,000 acres, countless families sold and moved, some gladly, some reluctantly, some with no record remaining of whether they wanted to go or simply accepted the inevitable. What remains is the estate. What is erased is who was there before. George stands at the site in 1892. 125,000 acres secured. Architect hired. Plans drawn. He looks at mountains he now owns and sees the future. A model estate. Scientific forestry. Agricultural innovation. A place where wealth serves beauty and beauty serves wisdom. He does not see the 28 families of Shiloh. He cannot. They are already gone. This is not cruelty, this is vision, and vision requires focus. Focus requires editing. Editing requires removal of everything that does not serve the frame. In 1892, George Washington Vanderbilt II has purchased the blank canvas he needs. Now he can begin building the monument. But monuments require builders, scimitar and builders, unlike land. Remember, Act 3, The Construction of Another World. 1889. Construction begins. The architect is Richard Morris Hunt, 62 years old, designed the pedestal for the Statue of Liberty, built mansions for Astors and Belmonts, the finest architect in America, perhaps the world. He looks at George's plans and sees ambition that makes his other clients look modest. 250 rooms, across 4 acres of floor space, 178,926 square feet of interior space. Larger than any private residence in the Western Hemisphere, larger than most European palaces. Hunt designs it in French Renaissance chateau style. Limestone from Indiana, brick from estate kilns, stone carved by Italian masons, every detail imported or handcrafted. Nothing in this house will be ordinary. The landscape architect is Frederick Law Olmsted, designed Central Park, the greatest landscape architect in American history. He is 67 years old when George hires him. He looks at 125,000 acres of cut-over mountain wilderness and accepts the challenge no one else would attempt. Transform devastation into Eden. The engineer is Rafael Guastavino, master of the tile vault. His curved ceilings will make the house fireproof, acoustically perfect, structurally impossible by conventional standards. These are the names history remembers. Now the names history forgets. 1,000 workers arrive daily at the peak of construction. They come from Asheville, from mountain communities, from as far as Italy, brought specifically for stonework. They build a railroad spur just to transport materials. Brick kilns operating on-site produce 30,000 bricks per day for 6 years. Do the mathematics: 30,000 bricks daily, times 300 working days yearly, times 6 years, 54 million bricks, each one mixed, molded, fired, transported, and laid by human hands. 1,000 workers, 10-hour days, 6-day weeks, for 6 years of their lives. 60 stonemasons working simultaneously on the exterior, carving limestone, cutting granite, creating gargoyles and finials and cornices and details no one will see from ground level. But that must be perfect anyway, because perfection is the point. This is what 250 rooms costs in human terms. This is what vision looks like when you subtract the visionary and count only hands. The workers are expected to provide 10 hours of labor per day, 6 days per week, Sunday reserved for rest, or for church, or for recovering enough strength to return Monday morning. Winter 1892. The carpenters petition. They request 8-hour workdays during winter months when daylight is short. They cite safety, fatigue, the difficulty of precision work in failing light. The estate's response: install electric lights. The work continues. 10 hours daily. Construction sites are dangerous in 1892. No safety regulations, no workers' compensation, no insurance. If you fall from scaffolding, if you are injured by stone or saw, you stop working, which means you stop earning. The Biltmore workers petition again. They request half pay if injured on the job, not full wages. Half, just enough to feed families while recovering. The estate grants the request. By Gilded Age standards, this is progressive. By human standards, it means you previously got nothing. 1893. A letter surfaces in estate records. The construction supervisor writes to Richard Morris Hunt, he notes, almost casually, that the workforce now includes more African American employees than white. This is remarkable for 1893 North Carolina. This is progressive for the era. Photographs show integrated work crews, black and white masons working side by side, carpenters of different races sharing scaffolding. Look closer. Payroll records show segregated crews, separate labor categories, different wage scales for identical work. The integration is visual. The structure reflects the racial hierarchies of the era. The same year, 1893, another letter surfaces. The railroad car used to transport workers breaks down. The architect requests a replacement, specifies it for white employees only. African American workers must find their own way. Walk, arrange transport. Arrive however they can. The new car excludes them. This is the contradiction, progressive vision implemented through traditional power structures. Scientific management applied to labor the same way it is applied to agriculture. Enlightened paternalism that is genuinely enlightened and genuinely paternalistic and cannot see the tension between those terms. George is building a model estate. Model means exemplary. Exemplary means worth copying. Worth copying means successful by measures the existing system accepts. The existing system in 1893 North Carolina includes segregation as fundamental design. George does not challenge this. His progressivism extends to forestry, architecture, agricultural innovation. It does not extend to dismantling racial hierarchies. He pays above market wages, provides employment, builds a model village for workers with running water and modern amenities. Within the model, he is generous. He does not question the model itself. 1,000 workers daily, 60 stonemasons, 30,000 bricks, 10-hour days. How many injuries went unrecorded? How many workers died during 6 years of construction? The estate archives contain no death records, no memorial, no list of names of men who gave portions of their lives to build someone else's monument. They exist in photographs, anonymous figures on scaffolding, faces too small to identify, hands holding tools, bodies bent to labor. They built the house. The house does not remember them, but some names survived. Reverend William Logan, African-American minister who helped George acquire land in the early 1890s, knew the mountain communities, knew who might sell and for what price, became invaluable to the project. George hired him as foreman, put him in charge of work crews, paid him foreman wages. When Logan grew too ill to walk to the construction site, George sent his personal carriage to transport him every day, for months, until Logan could no longer work at all. When Logan died, George attended the funeral, spoke at the service, made financial provision for Logan's widow. Decades later, the estate was still paying Logan's widow her late husband's salary, 33 years after his death, long after any legal obligation, long after anyone would have noticed if the payment stopped. This is extraordinary. This is also paternalism, because Logan could not refuse the terms, could not negotiate the wage, could not choose to work elsewhere for better pay. The job was a gift. The carriage was a gift. The salary to the widow was a gift. Gifts create gratitude. Gratitude creates loyalty. Loyalty creates power that does not have to announce itself. Sylvester Owens started as groundskeeper, worked the estate for 44 years, became head groundskeeper, became known as the Azalea King for his work developing the estate's gardens, achieved a position almost no African-American man in the South could achieve in the early 20th century. This happened because George valued competence, valued expertise, was willing to promote based on merit rather than race. This happened within a system where Owens still could not eat in the same dining room as white staff, could not use the same facilities, could not expect his children to have the same opportunities. Individual advancement within systemic inequality. The estate employed hundreds of workers whose names were never recorded. Carpenters and masons and brickmakers and laborers who spent years building rooms they would never enter as guests. Their work made the house possible. Their absence from the archives makes the house what it is, a monument that credits vision but not hands, that remembers architects but forgets builders, that celebrates the man who paid for it but erases the men who made it. Stand in the banquet hall today. 70-foot ceiling, carved stone. Flags from countries George never visited displayed as decoration. You can admire the craftsmanship. You cannot name the craftsman. This is not unique to Biltmore. This is how power works. Vision gets credit. Labor gets wages. The monument outlasts the builders because the monument has a name and the builders do not. But there is something specific happening here. George's brothers controlled railroads, controlled steel foundries, controlled shipping lines, controlled workers' lives through wages, hours, conditions. They did this openly, proudly. This was business. This was how empires were built. George controlled 125,000 acres, controlled 1,000 workers' days, controlled who could live on the land and who had to leave. He did this gently, progressively, with genuine care for individual workers. But control remains control. Different industry, same power structure. George built Biltmore to escape his family's world, to create an alternative, to prove that wealth could serve beauty and beauty could serve wisdom and wisdom could create something better than his brother's empires. But empires require workers, and workers. In 1895, America have no power to refuse the terms. The house opens Christmas Eve, 1895. 6 years of construction complete. 1,000 workers can finally see the finished product. Most of them will never enter it again. Not as guests. Opening the chateau, December 24th, 1895. Snow falling on the Blue Ridge Mountains. Carriages arriving at the entrance to Biltmore House. The first guests stepping into the entrance hall and stopping. Breath caught, trying to process scale. The house is not finished, will not be truly finished for another 7 years. But enough is complete to open, to show, to justify. 250 rooms. Only a fraction will ever be used. The banquet hall seats 64. The ceiling rises 70 feet. Flags hang from stone arches. A pipe organ stands at one end. 2,345 pipes waiting to fill the space with sound. The library contains over 20,000 volumes on carved wooden shelves reaching toward a painted ceiling. The swimming pool in the basement uses 70,000 gallons of water heated by steam boilers. The bowling alley has 2 lanes. The gym contains exercise equipment imported from Europe. There is a palm court with glass ceiling, a winter garden with tropical plants maintained at precise temperature year-round, a billiard room with 16th century tapestries on the walls, 35 bedrooms for family and guests, 43 bathrooms, 65 fireplaces, 3 kitchens, a main staircase so grand it could serve a palace. 80 servants are required to run the house and stables efficiently, 80 people to maintain 250 rooms for 1 man. George stands in the banquet hall on opening night and sees his vision realized. Everything he imagined, everything he planned. The monument is complete. Yet the doubt haunts. What does America's largest house signify when it's built for solitude alone? His mother is present, Maria Louisa Kissam Vanderbilt. She sees what her youngest son has built and understands what his brothers cannot. This is not excess. This is defense. Architecture as argument. Rooms as proof. Proof of what? That he is not useless. That his inheritance has a purpose. That his life means something beyond the accident of birth. The guests tour the house. They marvel at the scale, the craftsmanship, the sheer audacity of building a French chateau in the North Carolina mountains. But they also whisper, "Who is this for? What is it for? George has no wife, no children, no heirs. He has built a house that could accommodate a royal family, and he lives in it alone with his books. The excess is not in having too much. The excess is in having too much for no one." 1895. The year Biltmore opens. The richest 10% of Americans control 70% of the nation's wealth. The Vanderbilt family alone controls wealth equal to the combined assets of the United States Treasury. 11 million American families earn less than $380 per year. This is not poverty line. This is average. Most families in America live on roughly $1 per day. George has just spent $5 million building a house. $5 million equals the annual income of 13,157 average American families. While George was importing Venetian ceilings and Flemish tapestries, those 15,000 families were deciding whether to buy bread or coal, whether to send children to school or to work, whether to pay rent or eat. This is not George's fault. This is the structure of Gilded Age America. This is how wealth concentrates. This is what happens when industrial capitalism operates without constraint. But George is trying to build something different, an alternative model, wealth in service of beauty, beauty in service of wisdom, a place where profit does not govern every decision. The contradiction is this: the alternative model requires the existing system's profits to function. Biltmore's construction was financed by Vanderbilt Railroad dividends, by coal and steel and shipping profits, by the same industrial system George claims to reject. You cannot build a sanctuary from capitalism using capitalism's surplus. Or you can, but the sanctuary becomes an argument about aesthetics, not economics, about how to spend wealth, not whether to accumulate it. George walks through his completed house and sees conservation, scientific forestry, agricultural innovation, model treatment of workers, progressive values made architectural. His workers walk past gates they cannot enter and see 250 rooms for 1 man while their families sleep 4 to a room in company housing. Both views are accurate. Neither is complete. This is the Gilded Age's central tension. Unprecedented wealth concentrations creating unprecedented possibility for those who have it and unprecedented deprivation for those who do not. George chose beauty over power. This is genuine. This matters. But choosing beauty over power is only possible when you have enough power to make the choice. June 1st, 1898. George Washington Vanderbilt II marries Edith Stuyvesant Dresser at the American Cathedral in Paris. He is 35 years old. She is 25, descended from old New York society, intelligent, well-educated, everything appropriate for a Vanderbilt bride. But more importantly, she chose him. Not his fortune, not his name, not the house. Him, the shy, bookish youngest son who built a monument to loneliness in the mountains? Or did she choose the fortune and the name and the house? George will never ask this question. Cannot ask it. Because he needs the answer to be that someone saw him, saw past the inheritance to the person, saw value in the man, not the money. Edith becomes his partner in vision, helps manage the estate, participates in agricultural decisions, becomes involved in the community. The marriage transforms Biltmore from monument to home, from exile's palace to family residence, from proof of worth to actual life, for 14 years. This works. George has found someone who needs him. Edith has found someone who needs to be needed. The house has found its purpose. But the land, the forest, the vast agricultural experiment, the scientific management, the progressive dream that is still bankrupting him, and he does not yet know it. Act 5. The Gentleman Farmer, August 22nd, 1900. The Louis Define room on the second floor of Biltmore House. Edith gives birth to a daughter. They name her Cornelia Stuyvesant Vanderbilt. One child in 250 rooms. The only Vanderbilt heir born at Biltmore. The only person who will ever be born in this house. George is 37 years old. Finally a father. Finally necessary in the most fundamental way. Someone depends on him completely. Someone will carry his name without the burden of proving it means something. He becomes the gentleman farmer he always imagined. Up early studying agricultural reports, consulting with farm managers, importing Jersey cattle with pedigrees longer than most American families, breeding pedigreed hogs, attempting to make Biltmore estate scientifically productive, the dairy becomes famous. Biltmore Jersey cows set production records, the milk, butter, and cheese supply Asheville markets. This is not profitable. This is demonstration. Proof that scientific management can improve on traditional methods. George establishes the Biltmore Forest School, first forestry school in America. Partners with Gifford Pinchot, then Carl Schenck. Trains the men who will become America's first professional foresters. They learn sustainable logging, selective cutting, reforestation, everything George's vision represents. The school educates hundreds of foresters who spread scientific forestry across America. This is genuine achievement. This matters. This changes American conservation. It also loses money. Every year, George builds the Cathedral of All Souls, Episcopal Church in Biltmore Village, pays all construction costs, pays all operating expenses, ensures that Sunday collections go entirely to charity. The church costs him thousands annually. This is the progressive landlord in action, providing for his community, creating beauty, serving others, living his values. He is beloved in Asheville, known for generosity, for treating workers well, for supporting the community. He is also performing progressivism. Every generous act is also evidence. Every model program is also argument. Look what I built. Look how I treat workers. Look what inherited wealth can do when guided by wisdom instead of greed. The performance is genuine. He truly believes in these values, truly wants to demonstrate an alternative. But it is still performance, still compensation, still the same mechanism that started with books in childhood. Building monuments until someone notices, proving worth until it becomes real. 1907. The panic of 1907 hits American markets. Banks fail, credit evaporates, investment values collapse, even Vanderbilt wealth feels the contraction. George reviews his finances, for the first time with complete honesty. The revelation is devastating. Biltmore Estate is not self-sustaining, has never been self-sustaining, cannot be self-sustaining under any plausible scenario. The house costs a fortune to maintain. Heating alone requires train cars of coal monthly, staff salaries, repairs, utilities. The house consumes money at rates that would bankrupt most wealthy families. The farms lose money. Scientific agriculture costs more than traditional methods. Pedigreed cattle cost more than they produce. Model practices cost more than the market will pay. The forest school is successful as mission, catastrophic as business. Training foresters generates no revenue. The school operates entirely on George's subsidy, By 1908, it has become what one administrator calls a burden to Vanderbilt. The school continues operating until 1913, but loses money every year. The estate's only asset is the land itself. 125,000 acres, worth millions, generating almost nothing. The mathematics are brutal. Annual costs exceed annual revenues. The deficit grows yearly. George has been subsidizing operations from his personal fortune. The fortune is vast but not infinite. He must do what he swore never to do. He must sell the land. Not all of it, not the core estate, but the forest. Tens of thousands of acres. The land he planned to demonstrate sustainable forestry upon. The land where the forest school operates. He must sell it for profit, must liquidate the asset, must admit that his vision requires money more than the money requires vision. This is the collapse of the fundamental premise. Biltmore was supposed to prove that wealth could serve values, that progressive management could succeed, that the gentleman farmer could create a model worth replicating. Instead, the model requires constant subsidy. The progressive estate needs capitalism's profits to survive. The alternative to his brother's empires depends entirely on those empires' success. George contacts the federal government, offers to sell 80,000 acres, proposes they create a national forest, argues for conservation value, public benefit, educational purpose. The government declines. They do not want it, or they do not want to pay what George needs to charge, or they do not believe the land is worth what George claims. Whatever the reason, they say no. 1913. George tries again, refines the offer, adjusts the terms, pleads the case for conservation. The government declines again. He is trapped. He needs to sell to save the estate. The government is the only buyer willing to preserve the land as he wants it preserved. The government will not buy. His choice is narrow to two: sell to private timber companies who will clear-cut everything he spent decades protecting, or continue subsidizing operations until his fortune runs out. He cannot accept the first option. It destroys the vision completely. He cannot sustain the second option. The money is finite. So he negotiates, delays, hopes, tries to find another way. Between 1908 and 1914, George Washington Vanderbilt II lives inside an impossible contradiction. He must maintain the appearance of the successful gentleman farmer while negotiating the sale that proves the gentleman farmer failed. He cannot tell anyone, cannot admit to his family that the estate is bankrupting him, cannot let Asheville society know that the model landlord needs a bailout, cannot confess that 20 years of progressive demonstration achieved nothing but massive subsidy requirements. So he smiles, hosts guests, manages farms, discusses forestry, acts as though everything is sustainable. At night, he writes letters to government officials, to potential buyers, to anyone who might purchase the land at prices that would save him. The letters grow desperate, not in tone. George is too controlled for that, but in frequency, in the increasing willingness to adjust terms, in the slowly eroding requirements. First sell the forest but maintain school operations, then sell the forest, relocate the school, then sell the forest. Maybe the school closes, but the land stays protected. Then just buy the land. Any terms, please. He is 51 years old, has spent his entire adult life building an alternative to his brother's industrial empires, has created something beautiful and progressive and doomed. The contradiction is killing him. Not literally, not yet, but the stress is visible. His health declines. He looks older than his years, thinner, more withdrawn, because he finally understands what the library could not teach him. You cannot escape your family's world by building an alternative world if the alternative requires the original to fund it. You cannot reject industrial capitalism while living off industrial capitalism's dividends. You cannot be the progressive landlord without being the landlord. And being the landlord means power. And power in America in 1914 means participating in exactly the systems you claim to oppose. March the 6th, 1914. George is in Washington, D.C., still negotiating, still hoping, still trying to save the vision without abandoning it. He develops appendicitis. The surgery is successful. Recovery begins normally. Then complications arise. A blood clot, undetected. George Washington Vanderbilt II passes away in a Washington, D.C. hotel room on March 6, 1914. Dies in the seat of government power he claimed to despise. Dies still negotiating the land sale. Dies dependent on a federal purchase he cannot complete. The man who built America's largest private residence dies begging the government to take his land. Was it the appendectomy, or was it the unresolvable contradiction he could no longer sustain? The question George died without answering. Was he his father's son? His father built an empire. George built an estate. His father accumulated power. George accumulated books. His father needed nothing. George needed to prove he was needed. Different paths. Same wound. Did George escape the family curse, or did he simply relocate it to the mountains? The answer is both. The answer is neither. The curse was thinking he had to choose. He was his father's son, wealthy, powerful, capable of building monuments, also loved, intelligent, desperate to matter. He escaped nothing. He transformed everything. He built an alternative that depended on what he rejected. His gravestone in the Cathedral of All Souls churchyard says nothing about this. It cannot, because the real epitaph is standing on 125,000 acres surrounding him. Part of it will become national forest. Part of it will remain family estate. Part of it will be sold, developed, transformed beyond recognition. All of it will outlive him. None of it will answer whether he succeeded or failed. He is dead at 51. His daughter is 13. His widow inherits a $50 million architectural albatross, and the secret he could not admit. The dream was bankrupt before he died. 6. The Widow's Burden. March 6, 1914. Edith Stuyvesant Vanderbilt receives the telegram in Asheville. Appendicitis complications. Washington, D.C. He was 51 years old. She is 41. Their daughter, Cornelia, is 13. The estate is hers now. All of it. The house, the land, the farms, the debt, the dream, the secret. $50 million. That is the estate's appraised value in 1914. $50 million in assets. The newspapers report this number. Society discusses it. Edith Stuyvesant Vanderbilt, one of the wealthiest widows in America, what the newspapers do not report. How much of that $50 million is liquid? How much generates income? How much costs more to maintain than it produces? Edith knows. George left her the books, the ledgers, the correspondence with government officials, the failed sale negotiations, the mounting operational costs, the truth he could not admit publicly. The dream was bankrupt before he died. Not literally, not yet. The Vanderbilt fortune is still vast, but the estate cannot sustain itself. Never could. George was subsidizing operations from his personal wealth, and that subsidy was growing unsustainable. Edith has a choice. She could grieve. She could preserve everything exactly as George left it. She could maintain the vision at any cost. Or she could manage. She chooses to manage. This is not cold. This is not betrayal. This is survival. She has a 13-year-old daughter. She has 250 rooms requiring 80 servants. She has farms and forests and a massive estate that consumes money like a furnace, consumes coal. She has no husband, no partner. No one to share the burden George spent 20 years refusing to admit was a burden. So she does what George could not. She sells 86,700 acres of forest land at approximately $5 per acre. Total sale price, $433,851. The government accepts within a month. This is the sale George negotiated for 6 years. The sale he died trying to complete. Edith finishes it in 8 weeks. The difference is not competence. The difference is willingness to let go. George needed the sale to preserve his vision, needed the land to stay protected, needed to control how the forest would be managed. These requirements made negotiation impossible. Edith needs the money. She negotiates from different priorities. The land will be protected. Yes, it will become Pisgah National Forest. But she is not trying to dictate terms. She is trying to survive. 86,700 acres gone, roughly 70% of the original estate, the land where the forest school operated, where George demonstrated sustainable forestry, where he planned to prove that wealth could serve conservation, gone. The money helps, but not enough. 1916. Flooding destroys Frederick Law Olmsted's nursery operation, the greenhouses, seedlings, infrastructure, decades of landscape development washed away. Edith calculates repair costs, calculates potential revenue, makes the decision. She does not rebuild. 1917. Biltmore Estate Industries. The weaving and woodworking crafts program George established to provide employment and preserve Appalachian traditions. Faces financial troubles. Edith sells it. The mission continues under new ownership. But Biltmore no longer operates it, no longer subsidizes it. One more piece of vision liquidated. 1921. She sells Biltmore Village, the model community George built for workers. Homes with modern plumbing, streets designed by Olmsted. The progressive landlord's showcase. Sold. Each sale makes financial sense. Each sale removes a losing operation. Each sale brings the estate closer to sustainability. Each sale is also a piece of George's vision dismantled. Edith is not destroying his dream. She is performing triage, cutting away what cannot be saved to preserve what can. What can be saved is the house. 10,000 acres surrounding it. The core estate, the symbol, everything else must go. By 1925, she has liquidated most of George's empire. The estate is smaller, more manageable, closer to sustainable. Though still requiring subsidy, she remarries. Peter Gerry, United States Senator from Rhode Island. She moves to Washington, D.C. and Providence. Biltmore becomes a property she manages from distance. This is not abandonment. This is recognizing that she gave 14 years to George's vision while he lived and 11 years to saving it after he died. 25 years of her life spent maintaining someone else's dream. She is 52 years old when she remarries, entitled to a life beyond stewardship. March 1930. Cornelia and her husband, John Cecil, make a decision Edith never could. They open Biltmore Estate to the public. Admission $2. The house George built as private sanctuary becomes tourist attraction. The rooms where he read alone now have guided tours. Strangers walk through bedrooms, libraries, conservatories, point at tapestries, photograph fireplaces, marvel at excess. This is the final transformation. From private vision to public spectacle. From gentleman farmer's estate to commercial operation. It is also salvation. The admission fees help. Not enough to make the estate profitable. Not nearly enough. But enough to reduce the hemorrhaging. Enough to justify keeping it. Edith watches this happen from Washington. Her daughter running the estate she and George built. Opening it to the world, George escaped to the mountains to avoid. Does she see this as preservation or betrayal? No record shows her opinion. No letters survive expressing her thoughts. She attended the opening, supported the decision, then returned to her other life. She lived 44 years after George died. 14 years married to him, 30 years beyond. She spent the first 11 years dismantling his dream piece by piece, selling forests, selling villages, selling industries, each sale a pragmatic decision, each sale a small death of vision. She spent the next 33 years watching others run what remained, her daughter commercializing it, her son-in-law promoting it, the private becoming public, the sanctuary becoming destination. She died December 21st, 1958, 85 years old. Buried next to George in the Cathedral of All Souls churchyard. Her gravestone notes her marriages, her social position, her philanthropic work. It does not note that she saved Biltmore by abandoning everything Biltmore was supposed to be. It does not note that she succeeded where George failed by being willing to fail at what he thought mattered. It does not note that she carried his burden longer than he did, managed his vision more effectively than he managed it, preserved his monument by transforming it beyond recognition. The house stands because of her decisions, George's vision died because of her decisions. Both statements are true. Neither is complete. Act 7. The daughter who fled, Cornelia Stuyvesant Vanderbilt, born August 22nd, 1900, in the Louis XV room at Biltmore House. The only child, the only Vanderbilt heir born in the largest private residence in America. She is 13 years old when her father dies, old enough to understand loss, too young to understand inheritance. What she inherits is not just money. What she inherits is monument. 250 rooms, 10,000 acres, a mother managing crisis, a vision falling apart in slow motion. She grows up in a house built for crowds that contains only her, walks through ballrooms alone, reads in the library her father assembled, sleeps in one of 35 bedrooms while dozens remain empty. Her childhood is Biltmore. Her adolescence is Biltmore. Her early adulthood is Biltmore opening to the public and her becoming part of the attraction. March 1930. Cornelia is 29 years old, married to John Francis Amherst Cecil. They decide to open the estate to tourists. This is practical. This is necessary. This is the only way to save the house. But for Cornelia, it is also exposure. Friends and staff later recall the opening pushed Cornelia into a spotlight she did not welcome. She was private, bookish, like her father, passionate about arts and culture, like her father, uncomfortable with public attention. The opening changes everything. Now her home has operating hours, guided tours, strangers pointing at her family's furniture, asking questions about her childhood, treating her life as exhibit. She smiles, greets visitors, plays the role expected. Cornelia Vanderbilt Cecil, gracious hostess, heir to American aristocracy. But the tension builds. Staff notice, friends notice. She is performing. And performance costs. What do you do when you inherit a monument to a father you barely knew, when the house that was supposed to be sanctuary becomes prison, when every room reminds you of expectations you never chose? You flee, or you try to. Around 1932, Cornelia tells friends she finds life at Biltmore too dull. She moves to New York City to study art. This is framed as temporary, as education, as appropriate for a young woman of her class and interests. But it is escape. New York is not Asheville. New York does not care that she is a Vanderbilt, or cares differently. In New York, she can be Cornelia, who studies art, not Cornelia, who inherited the house. She can paint, attend galleries, discuss culture with people who value culture for itself, not for what it represents or costs. For the first time in her life, she is not the daughter of Biltmore. She is herself. 1934. Paris. Cornelia divorces John Cecil. Friends later claim it was a marriage she never wanted. Some accounts suggest her mother encouraged the match, though this remains disputed. A marriage that made sense for the estate, but not for her. Whether this is true or retrospective interpretation. The divorce happens, and then the transformation begins. She dyes her hair pink, changes her name to Nilcha, begins signing paintings with her new name, reinvents herself completely. This is not subtle rebellion. This is obliteration of identity. Cornelia Vanderbilt. Cecil ceases to exist. Nilcha emerges, an artist, a free woman, someone with no connection to monuments or estates or inherited burdens. She never returns to Biltmore, never returns to the United States, spends the rest of her life in Europe, primarily England. Reports suggest she and her mother never met again after the divorce. Whether this is literally true or emotionally true. The distance is real, permanent, chosen. Cornelia fled at 34, lived another 42 years, died February 7th, 1976, in Oxford, England, 75 years old. Her ashes were interred in a churchyard in Oxfordshire, not next to her father in Asheville, not in the family plot, an ocean away from Biltmore. She seemed, by all accounts, to avoid all reference to her Vanderbilt life, did not speak of the house, did not acknowledge the inheritance, created art under a name that could not be traced to wealth or history or monuments. This is the most complete rejection possible. Not selling the house, not transforming it, not even opposing it publicly, simply erasing it from her life as if it never existed. George Washington Vanderbilt II built Biltmore to escape family expectations, built it in mountains far from Newport society, built it as sanctuary from a world that did not need him. Cornelia had to escape Biltmore for the same reason. The pattern repeats, the wound repeats, the mechanism repeats. George fled to building, created alternative world, found meaning in construction. Cornelia fled from what he built, could not find meaning in maintenance, could not perform the role monument required. Both were passionate about arts and culture. Both valued learning over profit. Both were sensitive, intelligent, uncomfortable with the performance wealth demanded. She inherited his intellectual temperament. She inherited his psychological wound. She rejected his architectural solution. Because for George, the building was freedom. For Cornelia, the building was cage. George chose Biltmore. Cornelia was born into it. Choice versus inheritance. That is the difference. He built 250 rooms to prove he mattered. She abandoned 250 rooms to prove she was more than they contained. Different strategies. Same struggle. How do you become necessary when everything is given? How do you matter when mattering means performing someone else's vision? George answered by building. Cornelia answered by leaving. George's solution required land, workers, millions of dollars, decades of effort. Cornelia's solution required a train ticket and the courage to never return. Her solution was cheaper, more effective, more devastating to the vision. Because the monument was supposed to last generations, was supposed to be preserved by heirs who understood its importance, was supposed to mean something beyond George's lifetime. Instead, the only heir fled, changed her name, dyed her hair pink, created art in England under an identity that severed all connection to the house where she was born. What she left behind? 2 sons, William and George, born in the same Louis XV room where Cornelia was born, where George's daughter was born, where the Vanderbilt line continued. The sons stayed, inherited the estate. One chose land and farms, one chose the house and tourism, but Cornelia left permanently, completely. She visited them, reportedly, maintained some relationship, but never at Biltmore, never in America, never in context of the inheritance. Every reinvention was a rejection. Every painting signed Nilcher was a declaration, I am not Cornelia Vanderbilt. I am not the daughter of the estate. I am not the heir to monuments. I am whoever I choose to be. And what she chose was anywhere but Biltmore. The house her father built to prove he mattered. The house that proved to his daughter that monuments matter more than the people trapped inside them. 250 rooms, 1 daughter. She chose everything except the room where she was born. The brothers' choice. Cornelia left 2 sons, William Amherst Vanderbilt, Cecil, George Henry. Vanderbilt, Cecil, brothers, heirs to Biltmore Estate, born into the monument their great-grandfather built, their grandmother saved, their mother abandoned. They inherit the question every Vanderbilt inherits. What do you do with a legacy you did not choose by mid-20th century? The mathematics are brutal. Biltmore. Estate loses over $250,000 per year. The house consumes money, maintenance, heating, staff, taxes. The costs never stop. The only profitable operation is the dairy. Biltmore milk and ice cream sell well. Generate actual revenue. Everything else the house, the gardens. The tourist operation bleeds money despite admission fees. The brothers face reality their mother refused to face, and their great-grandfather died avoiding. The estate cannot support 2 families, cannot even fully support 1. The choice is simple, divide the inheritance or abandon it entirely. They divide. George Cecil chooses land, Biltmore Farms, the agricultural operations, the dairy, the profitable parts. He takes what generates income and builds a business. Dairy becomes development. Farmland becomes real estate. He makes it work, makes it grow, turns inheritance into enterprise. He does not choose the house. William Cecil chooses the house, the 250-room albatross, the money pit, the monument. He is working in banking. Successful career, no particular reason to abandon it for a failing tourist attraction in North Carolina. But he chooses it anyway. 1960. William leaves banking, moves to Asheville full-time, commits to the house. Not as curator, not as preservationist, as businessman. He will make Biltmore succeed, or he will fail trying. The difference between William and his great-grandfather George William accepts what the house must become to survive. William Cecil looks at the problem clearly. Biltmore House is magnificent, historic, beautiful, completely unsustainable as private residence or even as simple museum. To save it, he must transform it. To preserve his great-grandfather's anti-commercial vision, he must commercialize it completely. This is the necessary betrayal. George built Biltmore to escape commercialism, built it far from cities specifically to avoid market pressures, built it as demonstration that wealth could serve beauty instead of profit. William will save Biltmore by making it profitable, will preserve the anti-commercial vision by abandoning anti-commercial principles. He starts small, newspaper advertisements, recipes using Biltmore dairy products, 25 cents per recipe. This is not dignified. This is not what Vanderbilts do. This is desperation marketed as charm. It works. He tries publicity stunts, wine tastings, garden tours, special events, anything to increase visitors, anything to generate revenue. The estate grows employees from 100 to 2,400, adds restaurants, shops, a winery, conference facilities, wedding venues, everything George avoided by building in the mountains. William imports to the mountains, commercialism, marketing, branding. The house becomes America's largest home. Boar. Trademark symbol revealing everything. The irony is perfect. To save grandfather's vision of wealth serving beauty, William makes beauty serve wealth. To preserve the sanctuary from capitalism, he turns sanctuary into capitalist enterprise. Does this constitute betrayal? Only if you believe the original vision mattered more than the structure. Only if you value George's intentions over the house's survival. William chooses survival. This is pragmatic. This is necessary. This is also profound transformation of meaning, because what he saves is not what George built. The physical structure survives. The stone, the ceilings, the carvings, the library all preserved beautifully, maintained better now than George maintained them. But the meaning changes completely. George built Biltmore as argument, against his brother's empires, against Gilded Age commercialism, against the idea that wealth must generate more wealth. The house was supposed to prove that money could serve higher purpose. William proves that higher purpose requires money. Lots of it, generated continuously. From exactly the commercial activities George rejected, the house survives by becoming what it was built to oppose. This is not William's failure. This is realism. This is understanding that monuments require maintenance, and maintenance requires money, and money requires commerce, and commerce requires abandoning the anti-commercial premise. George wanted to prove inherited wealth could become earned through service. William proves that inherited monuments can only survive through profit. Different lessons. Both true. William succeeds where his great-grandfather failed. Makes Biltmore sustainable, grows it into major employer, tourist destination, economic engine for Asheville. He does this by doing everything George would have hated. But the house stands. 250 rooms preserved, gardens maintained, history protected. The question is whether what stands is still Biltmore, or whether it is something else wearing Biltmore's architecture. Tourist attraction in chateau costume, commercial operation in historical drag. William dies knowing he saved the house. He does not die knowing whether saving the house meant destroying what the house meant. That question outlives him, outlives all of them, because the house still stands. Visitors pay admission, buy souvenirs, attend events, generate $50 million in annual revenue. Most of that revenue gets reinvested. Maintenance, preservation, staff. The operation is sustainable now, self-sufficient in ways George never achieved, but self-sufficient, doing what's serving, who meaning what the books remain. Unread. Beautiful. Preserved. Meaningless except as backdrop. That is what William saved. The backdrop, the stage, the physical manifestation emptied of original purpose and filled with new purpose that contradicts it. He had no choice. The alternative was losing everything. But choice and necessity do not make contradiction comfortable. Do not make betrayal feel like anything except betrayal, even when betrayal is survival. This is what inheritance means in the fourth generation. You preserve what you can, you abandon what you must. You call it success and try not to think too hard about what success cost. Act 9. The Tourist Estate, a present-day Biltmore. Estate operates as one of America's most successful historic house museums. 1.4 million visitors annually. They come from all 50 states, from dozens of countries. They pay admission ranging from $70 to $90 depending on season. They tour the house, walk the gardens, visit the winery, eat at restaurants, shop in multiple gift stores. The estate employs over 2,000 people, year-round, more during peak seasons. Gardeners, tour guides, restaurant staff, maintenance workers, security, administration. More employees now than during construction. Annual revenue exceeds $50 million. Most of it gets reinvested. Maintenance on a structure this size is constant. Roofing, stonework, climate control, preservation of tapestries, paintings, furniture. The house consumes money even when profitable. 1963. Biltmore certified as National Historic Landmark. Official recognition of architectural and historical significance. Protected status. Governmental acknowledgement that this matters. But matters how matters to whom, the house that George built as private sanctuary now has operating hours. Visitor capacity limits. Traffic flow patterns designed by consultants. Audio tours in multiple languages. Accessibility accommodations. Gift shops strategically placed. This is professional museum operation. This is hospitality industry. This is heritage tourism executing at highest level. This is also complete transformation of purpose. George built Biltmore to read alone in the library. Now the library has velvet ropes preventing visitors from touching anything. Has guided tours explaining the collection. Has interpretation that contextualizes everything except what the books meant to the man who assembled them. Because what they meant is unknowable, unsaleable, uncommerciable. Cannot fit in a 15-minute tour segment. Cannot be photographed. Cannot generate revenue. So the story becomes, look at this beautiful library. Look at these rare books. Look at the craftsmanship of the shelving. Look at the painted ceiling. Look at everything except the loneliness. The Biltmore Company's marketing materials describe George Washington Vanderbilt II as a man of refined tastes who loved learning, appreciated beauty, and pioneered conservation. All true, all incomplete. The official narrative is enlightened gentlemen who built model estate, who treated workers well, who practiced scientific forestry, who created something beautiful and left it as legacy. The narrative visitors receive is sanitized, simplified, optimized for tour groups and short attention spans. What they learn, George loved books, collected over 20,000 volumes, built America's largest private residence, established first forestry school, married Edith, had one daughter, died young. What they do not learn, why he built it, what he was escaping, what it cost psychologically, what it cost financially, what it cost to the people displaced. What visitors see is curated heritage. What visitors miss is complicated truth. They see the banquet hall. They do not see George sitting alone at a table for 64. They see the library. They do not see shame-based displacement through compulsive acquisition. They see the bedroom suites. They do not see Cornelia fleeing to Europe and never returning. They see model village. They do not see workers petitioning for half pay during injury. They see conservation legacy. They do not see desperate land sale negotiation. George died without completing. This is not lying. This is interpretation. This is choosing which truths fit in a tourism framework and which truths make visitors uncomfortable. Because people do not pay $90 to feel uncomfortable. They pay to admire, to marvel, to photograph beauty and feel they have encountered something exceptional. Biltmore delivers this experience expertly. The house is maintained beautifully. Gardens are spectacular. Staff are knowledgeable and courteous. The operation runs with precision that George never achieved in his lifetime. The irony is that the house works better now as tourist attraction than it ever worked as home. As home, it bankrupted George, required constant subsidy, failed at every practical purpose. As tourist attraction, it generates millions, employs thousands, sustains itself and the surrounding economy. The commercial success George tried to avoid turned out to be the only thing that could save what he built, America's largest home. The trademark symbol appears on merchandise, on marketing materials, on the website. It transforms descriptor into brand, transforms house into product. This is what survival requires in 21st century. You cannot maintain a structure this size on admission fees alone. You need restaurant revenue, retail revenue, event space rental, wine sales, branded merchandise, commercial partnerships. You need capitalism. The thing George built the house to escape. The estate's own literature celebrates this, celebrates sustainability, celebrates that most revenue gets reinvested, celebrates that the house supports itself now. What the literature doesn't ask. What does it mean when the anti-commercial vision survives only through commercial success, when the private sanctuary exists only as public attraction, when the monument to alternative values requires traditional business practices to stand? The visitors do not ask this either. They walk through the library, take photographs, buy books about Biltmore in the gift shop, maybe purchase reproduction furniture from the Biltmore collection, maybe join as members for repeat visits and special access. They experience Biltmore as destination, as attraction, as beautiful historic house worth the admission price. They do not experience it as wound, as compensation, as monument to man who spent his life trying to prove he was not useless and died without ever getting the answer. That Biltmore is gone, if it ever existed outside George's psychology. What remains is the performance, the stage set, the architectural embodiment of Gilded Age excess now serving as educational resource and economic engine. What remains is 250 rooms that mean everything except what they meant to the man who built them. The library where George tried to hide still exists. The thousands of books still line the walls. Tourists still photograph the beauty. But the library is not prison anymore. It is exhibit. The books are not proof anymore. They are decoration. The transformation is complete. The house has been saved by being changed, preserved by being repurposed, maintained by abandoning maintenance of meaning. Almost none of them see George. Act 10. Hurricane Helene. September 27th, 2024. Tropical storm. Helene hits western North Carolina. The storm has already devastated Florida as Category 4 hurricane. By the time it reaches Asheville, it has weakened to tropical storm. But tropical storm in mountains means something different than tropical storm on coast. Means rain. Relentless. The kind of rain that overwhelms rivers, that turns creeks into torrents, that makes the French Broad River, which runs through Biltmore property, rise 27 feet above normal levels, 27 feet of water at the estate entrance, flooding across the property, damage to landscapes, damage to infrastructure, damage to the lodge gate building where visitors enter. The house itself survives, built on high ground. George chose the site well. Even catastrophic flooding cannot reach the main structure, but the estate around it suffers. Trees down, erosion, paths washed away, gardens damaged, the landscape Olmsted designed, that generations of gardeners maintained, partially destroyed in hours. Nature reclaims what wealth built. Water does not care about architectural significance, does not care about National Historic Landmark status, does not care about 130 years of careful maintenance. Water flows where gravity takes it, destroys what lies in its path, retreats leaving mud and damage, and the humbling reminder that human construction is temporary. The estate closes. For the first time in decades, closes for extended period, not for snow, not for renovation, for disaster recovery. Crews begin assessment, begin cleanup, begin the expensive, careful work of restoration. November 2nd, 2024, just over a month after the storm, Biltmore announces reopening. The house survived. The gardens can be restored. The estate will endure. During earlier repairs to the lodge gate, damaged by flooding, workers discovered something behind drywall installed during previous remodeling. They found the original fireplace, the one that was there when the building first opened. Hidden, forgotten, covered over during decades of updates and changes. By March 2025, 5 months after reopening, visitor numbers begin recovering. New trees planted. Ongoing restoration work continues. The estate adapts, as it always has. The storm revealed what was hidden. Destruction exposed original design. Sometimes you have to tear things down to find what was there before. The land where Biltmore stands was not empty when George bought it. Not wild, not unused. This was Cherokee territory, for thousands of years before European arrival. Cherokee people lived here, hunted here, built communities here. This was homeland, between 1791 and 1835. A series of treaties ceded Cherokee land to the United States. The word ceded makes it sound voluntary. The reality was coercion and encroachment, steady pressure, steady loss, steady retreat into smaller and smaller territory. 1838 to 1839, Trail of Tears, forced removal of Cherokee people from their remaining southeastern lands. 16,000 Cherokee forced to walk to Oklahoma. 4,000 died during removal. The land emptied, not naturally. Through violence, through policy, through decision that native ownership did not count as ownership. By the time George arrived in 1888, this history was barely 50 years old, within living memory. The land looked wild because it had been emptied, looked available because previous inhabitants had been removed. George built his conservation showcase on stolen land. This is not unique to Biltmore. This is American history. Most land in America is stolen land. Most wealth in America is built on theft or slavery or both. But there is particular irony here. George built Biltmore to demonstrate enlightened land stewardship, to show that wealth could serve conservation, that scientific management could protect natural resources. He built it on land stolen from people who had stewarded it sustainably for millennia, who had lived here without depleting it, who had managed forests and rivers and wildlife through traditional practices that modern science is only now beginning to understand. The conservation legacy George left is real. Pisgah National Forest protects 86,000 acres. Biltmore Forest School trained foresters who spread sustainable practices nationally. These achievements matter. They also rest on foundation of displacement and theft that preceded George by decades, but that he benefited from completely. Now climate crisis threatens what George built. Hurricane Helene is preview. Storms intensify. Flooding worsens. Weather patterns destabilize. Climate crisis caused by industrial capitalism, by coal and oil and deforestation and emissions, by the same economic system that generated Vanderbilt wealth, by railroads and factories and shipping lines that George's family fortune depended on. George fled industrial capitalism to build Conservation Showcase. Conservation Showcase required industrial capitalism's profits to construct. Industrial capitalism caused climate change. Climate change now threatens the showcase. The circle completes. You cannot escape a system by using its surplus. Cannot build alternative on foundation extracted from the thing you oppose. Cannot demonstrate better way using worse ways profits. George tried. George failed. Not completely. Not in every way. But fundamentally, because the house stands. Yes, the forest is protected. Yes, the legacy persists. Yes. But the house stands because his grandsons commercialized it. The forest is protected because his widow sold it to the government he tried to avoid. The legacy persists in form that contradicts its original meaning. And now, the climate, destabilized by the capitalism his wealth came from, threatens even the transformed remainder. Hurricane Helene flooded Biltmore. 27 feet of water. Future storms will be worse. Flooding will intensify at some point. Maybe not soon, maybe not this century, but eventually the water will win. The discovered fireplace at Lodge Gate is perfect symbol, hidden behind renovation, forgotten, covered over, revealed by disaster. Sometimes destruction exposes truth. Sometimes you have to lose the surface to find what lies beneath. Biltmore's surface is beautiful, maintained, successful, national landmark, tourist destination, economic engine. Beneath that displacement, theft, compensation, shame, unsustainable vision sustained only by abandoning vision. Monument to man who tried to escape irrelevance by building proof of relevance and died without knowing if he succeeded. The house contains both truths, the surface and the foundation, the beauty and the cost, the vision and the failure. The storm does not care which truth matters. The water does not judge. The climate crisis will not spare monuments because they are beautiful, or because they mean well, or because they once represented alternative to exploitation. The water will rise. The storms will come. The house will stand until it cannot, and when it falls, if it falls. The question will remain, what was it all for Biltmore? The state still stands. 130 years after George Washington Vanderbilt II opened it. 94 years after Cornelia fled it. 64 years after William Cecil saved it by transforming it. Still family-owned. Still the largest privately owned home in the United States. Still 250 rooms on 8,000 remaining acres. 86,000 more acres protected as Pisgah National Forest. The rest sold, developed, transformed. 2017 appraisal valued the public areas at $300 million. Just the portions tourists see, just the house and immediate grounds. The full estate value is higher, undisclosed, private. 2,500 people earn living from Biltmore now. More than twice the number who built it. They work restaurants, retail, tours, events, maintenance, administration, winery, gardens, security. The estate generates revenue that cycles back into preservation. Roof repairs, stonework, climate control systems, conservation of tapestries and paintings, ongoing care for structure that will always need care. This is success by any practical measure. The house survives, employs people, serves community, educates visitors, protects history. But the question remains, did George's vision succeed, or did something else wearing his vision's name? He wanted to prove inherited wealth could become earned through service. Wanted to demonstrate that money could serve beauty instead of profit. Wanted to create alternative to his brother's industrial empires. What actually happened? His widow sold the vision piece by piece to save the house. His daughter fled to Europe and never returned. His grandsons divided the inheritance, and one chose profit explicitly. The other saved the house by commercializing everything George built it to avoid. The estate survives through exactly the methods George rejected. Tourism, branding, marketing, commercial partnerships, revenue generation, profit motive driving preservation. The anti-commercial vision persists only because later generations abandoned anti-commercial principles. Is this success or failure? Both. Neither. The question assumes they are separable. What George built was magnificent and unsustainable, beautiful and bankrupting, visionary and doomed. He created something that could not survive in the form he imagined, but that was worth saving anyway. His heirs understood what he could not. Purity of vision matters less than persistence of structure. Ideological consistency matters less than practical survival. What you intended matters less than what remains. They saved what they could. They transformed what they must. They called it preservation, and it was, even if what they preserved was form without original meaning. Pisgah National Forest exists because George failed, because he could not sustain his estate and had to sell, because failure forced sale, and sale created protected land. 86,000 acres conserved. Scientific forestry methods now standard practice. Generations of foresters trained. This is genuine legacy. This matters. It happened because the vision collapsed. Because George died negotiating terms he never wanted to accept. Because success came through failure. The model workers' village George built is gone. Sold 1921. Became commercial district. The progressive housing experiment ended. But while it existed, it provided better housing than most workers had access to. That mattered to the people who lived there, even if it did not last. The forest school closed, but the foresters it trained spread across America, changed how forests are managed. The institution failed. The impact survived. The house George built to live in alone now hosts visitors yearly. Millions of them. He would hate this. He would also recognize that his choice was solitary monument that crumbles or public monument that persists. He chose implicitly by building something too large to maintain privately. His psychology chose isolation. His architecture chose preservation. The architecture won. Cornelia chose herself, chose art over inheritance, chose Europe over Biltmore, chose pink hair and a new name over being Vanderbilt heir. This seems like rejection, like failure of the vision to sustain across generations. But maybe it is success. Maybe the point of building monuments is so your children can choose not to be defined by them. Maybe freedom from inheritance is the inheritance that matters. She painted, lived on her terms, died where she chose. That is success by any measure that centers human flourishing over architectural preservation. George Washington Vanderbilt II built America's greatest mansion, never turned it into political power, never leveraged it for social climbing, never used it to accumulate more wealth. He used it to hide, to compensate, to prove something unprovable, to create alternative world when the real world had no place for him. Did he escape power's logic or simply relocate it? He escaped some parts. He never became his brothers, never built industrial empire, never prioritized profit, never treated workers as disposable, but he relocated other parts, still controlled land, still employed workers, still exercised power inherent in being wealthiest family in America, just exercised it differently, more gently, more progressively. Still power. You cannot opt out of power when you are powerful. You can only choose how to use it. George chose better than many, worse than he believed, about as well as someone in his position reasonably could. That is not triumph. That is not tragedy. That is human limitation confronting structural inequality and doing slightly better than baseline while believing he was doing much better than he was. His gravestone in Cathedral of All Souls Churchyard says George Washington Vanderbilt. Born 1862, died 1914. 51 years. It does not say what he built, does not say what he proved or failed to prove, does not say whether inherited wealth became earned, does not answer the question that drove him. His house says more. Says everything except the truth. Says, look at this beauty, look at this craftsmanship, look at this vision-made stone. Does not say, look at this compensation, look at this shame displacement, look at this monument to irrelevance trying to become monument to purpose. The forest says something different, says some things survive, some things matter, some things cost more than they are worth. Says land outlasts owners, trees outlast houses, rivers outlast monuments. Says you can build something beautiful and fail at what you meant it to prove and succeed at something you never intended, and the success and failure are both true and both incomplete, and both matter less than you think and more than you imagine. George spent 51 years building, $5 million inherited, most of it spent, 250 rooms, 125,000 acres assembled, then mostly sold. One daughter who fled. One widow who managed brilliantly what he managed poorly. Grandsons who saved what he built by abandoning what he meant. Millions walk through the house every year. Almost none know his story. Almost none ask why he built it. Almost none wonder what it cost psychologically to live in monument to your own irrelevance. They see beauty. That is enough. Maybe that is all that should remain. Because the beauty is real. The craftsmanship is real. The forest is real. The jobs are real. The protection of land is real. The psychology is gone. The wound is gone. The shame is gone. The man is gone. What remains is what he built. Not what he intended, not what he meant, what he made. Sometimes that is success, sometimes that is failure. Sometimes it is both at once. Sometimes the same thing can be monument and prison and beauty and waste and legacy and cautionary tale. Sometimes you build something that outlives your reasons for building it, that serves purposes you never imagined, that succeeds by failing at what you thought success meant. George Washington Vanderbilt II built America's greatest mansion. It stands. He is gone.